Piece of this, lead Republican counsel Steve Castor pressed Lieutenant Colonel Vindman about an offer he'd received to take a position as defense minister in Ukraine. It was a line of questioning designed to raise doubts about Vindman's allegiance to the United States.
Did Mr. Daniluk offer you a position of defense minister with the Ukrainian government?
He did. Every single time I dismissed it. Upon returning, I notified my chain of command. I'm an American. I came here when I was a toddler, and I immediately dismissed these offers, did not entertain them. The whole notion is rather comical.
It's rather significant.
Yeah.
You know, the Ukrainians offered you the post of defense minister. Did you ever think that possibly if this information was, got out, that it might create at least the perception of a conflict?
It's much more important what my civilian White House National Security Council chain of command thinks, more so than anybody else. And frankly, if they were concerned about me being able to continue my duties,
Of course.
they would have brought that to my attention.
They've accused you of espionage and dual loyalties. We've seen that in this room this morning. The 3 minutes that were spent asking you about the offer made to make you the Minister of Defense, that may have come cloaked in a Brooks Brothers suit and in parliamentary language, but that was designed exclusively to give the right-wing media an opening to question your loyalties.
David Ignatius, we've asked many times how far Republicans will go, how low they will go to defend the President of the United States. And I think we found a new one yesterday when you had the recipient of a Purple Heart sitting in front of them in dress uniform, having his loyalty questioned because he was born in Ukraine, left there when he was 3 years old, as he talked about last night and yesterday for a better life here in the United States with his family. He was mocked for demanding to have his title used respectfully, Lieutenant Colonel, and for wearing that uniform in the room. That was the angle Republicans went to, not the substance of his testimony. They didn't see the flares going up about what the President of the United States did from a firsthand account of someone who was on the call. They were worried about his loyalty because he was living in the country in question when he was a toddler.
It's been striking, really, since the impeachment hearings moved into this public phase, that the Republican defense has really not dealt with any of the substantive allegations. It's been more a defense of personal attack on the witnesses, trying to belittle them. In the case of Masha Yovanovitch, as Chairman Schiff said, an attempt to intimidate her. Through public tweets, this attempt to shame Lieutenant Colonel Vindman as somehow being disloyal. All of it tells you that the Republicans don't seem to have a substantive case. As we move forward, and these hearings will only get more intense with Sondland's testimony today, I think we should have in mind the question of how do the Democrats focus the public's attention on core questions. During Watergate, we kept saying, what did the president know and when did he know it? In this case, I think we're going to need to have a similar focus about the president's actions, about Rudy Giuliani. What was he doing? I mean, Trump keeps saying, talk to Rudy, talk to Rudy. Rudy's the driver. Well, what is it that Rudy wanted in Ukraine? What was he after? I think that's going to unfold in these coming days. Mm-hmm. But again, every time the Republicans go after somebody personally in this visceral way, as they did with Vindman, you know that they're feeling defensive and backed in a corner.
You know, if you look at the grand strategy of both sides, Democrats and Republicans, I must say, the Democrats have been masterful. I've been critical of the way they've run their hearings for some time, but they have laid out their case masterfully. One step after another, one fact on top of the other. Now is a good time, though, to just stop and talk about the colossal stupidity of the Republicans and their strategy, how Donald Trump has put them in such an extraordinarily impossible decision strategically by saying it was a perfect call. I did nothing wrong. There was no quid pro quo. Every Republican that we see knows there was a quid pro quo.
And yet
every Republican knows that Donald Trump was asking for dirt on Joe Biden in exchange for releasing the military funds. They should have, and there have been Trump apologists for weeks saying, just get to the end. Everybody knows he did this. Just get to the end and say, the president did it, so what? The president did it. It's bad, but it's not an impeachable offense. The president did it, all right, but we don't overturn an election because they should have done that 3 weeks ago. Instead, they are allowing Democrats to slowly pull their straw men apart piece by piece, day by day, week by week. And as they do, the president's numbers fall. And the people who think the president of the United States is lying about this and did something wrong keeps going up. So now we're at 7 out of 10 Americans because of this I mean, you've just got to watch this every day and watch it unwind and go, why are the Republicans so stupid to just not jump to where we're going to go at the end?
The ratings show people are watching, and the Republican strategy has been shifting every time because each of their strategies get debunked. They first were saying hearsay, hearsay, you can't do that. This is all about corruption. The Ukrainians didn't know about this. Well, take a look.
On July 25th, along with several of my colleagues, I listened to a call between President Trump and President Zelensky, the content of which has since been publicly reported. I found the July 25th phone call unusual because, in contrast to other presidential calls I had observed, it involved discussion of what appeared to be a domestic political matter.
I was concerned by the call. What I heard was inappropriate, and I reported my concerns to Mr. Eisenberg. It is improper for the President of the United States to demand a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen and a political opponent. It was also clear that if Ukraine pursued an investigation into the 2016 elections, the Bidens and Burisma, it would be interpreted as a partisan play.
Colonel Vindman, you indicated that you did include in your talking points the idea of Ukraine rooting out corruption, but that President Trump did not mention corruption. So when the president says now that he held up security assistance because he was concerned about rooting out corruption in Ukraine, that concern was not expressed in the 2 phone conversations that he had with President Zelensky earlier this year. Is that right?
Correct.
Did you discuss at all, at any point, their concerns about the hold on security assistance?
To the best of my recollection, in the August timeframe, the Ukrainian embassy started to become aware of the hold on security assistance, and they were asking if I had any comment on that or if I could substantiate that.
And that was before it became public, is that right?
Yes.
So, Mike, hearsay, blown to bits. The Ukrainians not knowing it was held up, blown to bits. About 2 or 3 other stupid Republican defenses blown to bits, all because Donald Trump won't let them just say what everybody knows.
Well,
he did it.
The truth.
That's the amazing thing in terms of Republican strategy or lack of strategy. They have all read the deposition that Vindman provided nearly 3 weeks ago. To allow him to sit there rather than saying, Colonel Vindman, name, rank, and serial number, thank you for your service. Did you listen to the phone call on the 25th? Yes, I did. Thank you for coming. And get him off instead of spending hours attacking him was incredible.
Yeah, and Ben Wittes, talk about those clips we just showed, how it really did just push aside all of the Republicans' defense, including Lindsey Graham's very creative interpretation of the hearsay evidence rule. And if you can, give us just a 30,000-foot look down at these hearings over the past 2 weeks. What have we learned?
Right. So what we've learned in the broadest sense is that the worst understanding of the president's conduct is the most accurate, which is that he conditioned military aid and a White House meeting for the new president of Ukraine on the delivery of specific political favors to himself, not to the United States. And I think all of that is pretty unambiguously clear at this point. What is missing from the picture, to a certain limited degree, is how much of this was done by Gordon Sondland and the people around the president, and how much of it was done by the president himself. We know that some of it was done by the president himself because we have the text of the phone call, which so upset Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. But I do think that this puts a real premium on Mr. Sondland's testimony today, because Sondland is the person who has repeated contacts with the president himself over this period and represents himself, including to State Department officials who will testify later in the week, as, you know, acting on the president's behalf. And so I think the thing to watch for today that I will be really curious about is to what extent, A, does Sondland revise previous testimony again? But secondly, to what extent are Democrats able to get him to talk about his conversations with the president? And to what extent, when he conveys this insistence on the deliverables that are these investigations, to what extent is he conveying something that Trump himself demanded clearly? In other words, does he bring this to the door and the conduct specifically of Trump himself?
You know, Devin Nunes gives us a tell at the beginning of every hearing about how much he and the Republicans have on these witnesses. Yesterday, he told us right from the outset he had nothing. Right. Because his opening statement was an attack on the media, which is fine. We get attacked all the time, but it had nothing to do with any of the evidence that he knew was about to be presented. Then in his questioning, Devin Nunes went to conspiracy theories about Ukraine actually being the country that meddled in the 2016 election. Colonel Vindman shot those down immediately, and then he spent the rest of his time trying to get Colonel Vindman to say out loud the whistleblower's name. Colonel Vindman would not do that. Chairman Schiff intervened and wouldn't allow that line of questioning. But the entire argument that you heard from the ranking member yesterday had nothing to do with the evidence that was being presented.
I got to say, I mean, you know, I don't know if you know it or not, I was in Congress, and Newt was a speaker. I got to say, if a Republican ranking member of the Intel Committee, like, did half or what, even threw any conspiracy theory out in a hearing like this, Newt would yank them off in a second. Anybody would.
There are lines.
Like, it is staggering that nobody is at home. There is no adult. I mean, there hasn't been one in a very long time, but it's just mind-boggling. And David Ignatius, the Intel Committee, used to be, along with the Ethics Committee, those used to be the two committees that were above partisan fray. After 9/11, there were a lot of ugly things that had to be sorted through after 9/11. A lot of really rancorous debates about how we were going to track down suspected terrorists and what we were going to do once we caught them. And yet, there they were, the Intel Committee, the Gang of Eight, the White House. They sat there, they worked on it together. Nancy Pelosi, from Nancy Pelosi to Dick Cheney to you name it, like everybody sat through it, worked together, and it was beyond reproach, above politics.
Joe, the Intelligence Committee in the House is a snapshot of how our politics has gotten broken. That committee was very divided once upon a time, and it got a new chairman in Republican Mike Rogers, who we've all seen on television, and a Democratic ranking member, Dutch Ruppersberger, a tough old prosecutor from Maryland. And the two of them made a deal. And the deal was, I've got your back. We are going to put this committee back together. And that committee, which used to see intense, bitter feuds, could never pass appropriations or authorization legislation, suddenly began to work. That's the committee that Devin Nunes, when he became chairman, broke all over again. We see the partisanship. We see the bitterness. If it's not partisan enough, they'll pull in Jim Jordan to make it even nastier. But it's really a tragedy when you think about where it's been and how it's changed to be a mirror of all of the dysfunction of our of our Washington situation. You know, I think the thing we have to hope for most is this impeachment process will be done so carefully with such clear evidence that people can understand that it begins to pull people back together towards the idea, yeah, the president did something wrong here. We have to take it seriously. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just going to keep going further toward the waterfall.
Well, you know, people talk about the time. It's a time we're in. It's a time. No, it's not. It's lack of character among people on these committees. Just a lack of character and a lack of love of country that they put their political party above their country. A perfect exhibit. What happens in the United States Senate? Guess what? Chairman Burr and the ranking member from Virginia, they work together very well and coordinate their messages. And actually, when they talk in a press conference, you're like, oh, wait a second. They're doing the business of the United States of America and not their own political party.
Wow. In the 13 years I've worked with you, I have never heard you accuse someone of not loving their country. And in fact, you're very careful with those words.
Did I say they are acting like they didn't love their country? I can say this. When they're on the Intel Committee, they are putting their party above their country. It's plainly obvious. And if you want to see somebody that puts their country first, look what the Democrats and Republicans do in the Senate.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.